Hello, people. This week I read The Infernal City by the author whose name I didn't write down in my notes because I am a bad YouTuber. Apologies to him. I gotta start remembering to do that. I do that a lot. In any case, I read The Infernal City. This is stories related to the Elder Scrolls gaming series. I've been looking for these because, with your Mass Effect here, there are some gaming franchises that I think are very good stories or what is it? Flower beds for stories, right? That they have good soil that could be utilized a lot better. And I think Elder Scrolls is one of them. Having said that, as I started reading through this book, I started to realize I don't actually know the story of Elder Scrolls whatsoever. Okay, if you've played the games, you understand they're large sandbox style games. So you can just wake up in the world. They can tell you half a thing to do, and you're like, I'm not going to do any of that. And you just run off, and now you're exploring caves and mountains for like 47 hours. All right, that's what I do. I just steal wheels of cheese, and I kill things, and I just roam around. It's actually kind of fun. But then I've never actually read the story, so when I will read a Mass Effect or a World of Warcraft book, I understand the vibe we're going to go for, right? I didn't understand the vibe. So in that sense, I can't say this got it wrong because it does capture some of the quest lines I remember from the game and etc. etc. Very funny. It can be serious. It tends to lean towards humor a lot of times. Very funny moments. It's not a like the end of the world kind of situation. It contains itself fairly well. So I don't have a problem with the story. What I do have a problem with, though, and what comes across in the game, now some of them, some like a World of Warcraft book may get the vibe across, and I think some RPG style books get the feel of the gaming across. This semi gets the feel, but not a whole lot, I would say. It could have been better. And what I think the main issue was, that's what I was going to get to, is even in my play of the game, where I'm not too heavily focused on the main storyline, I'm just doing side quests and little things like this. Some of the vibe of this fantasy style setting is the different races that you meet. It has a great collection of races. The world building in that sense is superb. And this book doesn't do a good job of this. If you haven't played the games before and they say Argonian, you aren't going to instantly know what that looks like. And it doesn't describe it to you hardly at all. Hardly at all. And then it doesn't keep up that description. When you add in fantastical creatures, it's hard to get, it's easy to get lost in what you're supposed to be looking at. And that's the main, it's the main problem I have with this book. I think it could have been leaps and bounds better if they had just done that. We have, what are the races? They have 3 type of elf races. The Altamir, the high elf, the tall, the pretty, good at magic. The Bosmer, these are shorter, typically your wood elf style. Dunmar, medium height, night elf. And Each of these will be treated differently, sort of in game. There's less of the prejudices that come across in the book. We have orcs. I think there's only one orc in this book, or two. Khajiit. There's a few Khajiits in here. But these Khajiit orcs are orcs, big and green. Khajiit are like cat men. But not furries, right? I guess furries might like them, but it doesn't have a furry vibe. More of a fantasy, serious, cat, humanoid vibe. And they get a, I never played in their lands, but they get like a Arabic Bedouin style feel to them. They'll sit out on rugs and trade you things, etc. This kind of thing. They also sell skooma. Is it skooma? I believe it's skooma. What? I might get them confused with the other Bethesda games. They'll sell you like illegal drugs. There are four types of humans. Breton, these are your shorter humans, typically good at magic. And I say typically on a lot of these things because as part of the fun of these books is that nothing's encased in stone. They let the lines blur a lot. You could be a Breton and a good fighter. You just typically won't see that out in the world. All Khajiit aren't criminals. You just typically see that most, again, per realm. Obviously, if you went to the desert realm where they're from, there's all mixes. And then some of those mixes drift out, and now we're in Morrowind, where all the elves are, or some of the elves are, and Khajiit are a different type here. And so we see where these prejudices come from. This kind of thing happens. Imperials, they're good at talking. They're not that big, but they're not small. A Roman feel to them. Red guards, these are the black ones. It's like a mini, not an in-game joke, but like an in-forum joke. The game's not racist. They're very good at fighting. I haven't seen their land yet either. There are Nords. I think that's Skyrim showed you a lot of the Nord. They're like your Scandinavian style, very tall, blonde, pale skin, great at fighting. And then the last will be, well, not the last, just last on my list, Argonians. Argonians are like the Khajiit in that they are lizard men, humanoid style lizards, breathe underwater, have claws, have scales a lot, but you can they'll run a shop, you can trade with them. People don't freak out about it. They might be looked at a kind of a way. Their views are a little different. We don't trust that they eat maybe raw fish or however that ends up going, right? But it's very important that you see these things when they're mentioned for the feel of the overall fantasy element to come across. And this book doesn't do a good job of that. Events being, I think we start with a Breton girl. Anaig. It's a great name. There's great names all throughout. It's Anaig and her best friend Mir Glim. Mir Glim being an Argonian. So she's a Breton. He's an Argonian. They hang out. She has the mage vibe to her. That being curiosity, headstrong, mixing potions, maybe getting in a mess that you shouldn't. And he's been along for the ride, I guess, their whole life. They live in Black Marsh. But again, Black Marsh is another zone I've never seen. And it didn't stick out to me in the reading of this book. But it's the land where the Argonians are from. And I'd be very interested in seeing it more. You see, I'm more interested in what's around than anything the book fed me, right? The book didn't feed it enough, I would say. In any case, they're out exploring, and I think her dad, forces her on a trip out of town for some reason. She doesn't know. And she has this cool, I don't know where she got it. I think she found it. which again, you find stuff in caves. It's a cool communication system wherein she can wear a pendant and she can send out a crow, a mechanized crow. Say, find Mir Glim. It'll go find him, and then through the crow's eyes or whatever, there's two-way communication. There's a lot of ancient tech in the game. Dwemer, I think, is the name of the dwarves. There's no dwarves in the game that I've ever seen. I wish there were, but I think they're like an extinct race. Or something happened. But their tech, their ruins are all throughout. And I'm assuming this is some Dwemer tech. In any case, she ends up on a boat, and you think, because it's like the boat's going to just take her to the Imperial City. They're not ruffians. They're sailors. And she's going to be stuck on a boat, but they're not going to like enslave her, which I guess is an option too. So all in all, I'm like, well, that's not so bad. You get to go to the Imperial City. I'm assuming her friend Mir Glim is going to come out onto the boat, and then they're going to go to the town. Nah, they just like, nah, I'm going to get you out. He busts her out, and they jump in the water and swim back because he's good at swimming. That's a good unexpected element there. But what they swim back to is a flying city that we come to know as Umbria, I believe. It's the one on the cover. It's a flying city. And this is the whole driving force of the story from multiple different perspectives. They watch as it goes over a town. Our Mir Glim is nervous about it because he says the tree's not talking to us anymore, and that might be a bad sign. And it's a hint into, I guess, some Argonian culture, which, again, I would love to get more of, but I don't get enough of it. Does every Argonian clan have like a sacred tree that talks to them? Are they connected by nature? I'm very interested, but it didn't give me enough. In any case, there are tendrils coming off of this city like a jellyfish. And people are just like walking to it, and little slugs come off of it. And it's just eating souls, essentially. Everyone there is dying. It's eating souls. There's a hum or an element or a magic to it that almost brainwashes Mir Glim to walk into it, but he's saved by Anaig. And then she determines in her mind, do we have to stop it? And the conversations are hilarious because she's like, we got to go stop it. And he's like, no, we don't. We can leave. We can just go away. And then he's like, and if we did want to stop it, how do you figure we do it? We don't even know what it is. We don't even know if it can be stopped. We could just die over there. But she won't hear of not going and trying. And they're boys, right? They're friends, so he's going to go with her. They get onto it. I think she has a levitation potion. So she gets onto it, and they think they're going, no. Yes, they get on. They try and slash one of the tendrils. Can't do anything to it. Then they're instantly captured. Then we see a whole just very weird, in a good way, a whole internal culture weird just to this island. Mir Glim gets taken off to another side where he has to swim in this kind of a water to bring up material, things that they want out of it. The girl, Anaig, ends up in a kitchen. I know, sexism, but it's not. Somehow the elves, I think it's, the elves or whoever's running this, the lords, the elves, want food. They want different types of food, and that's what these, I guess, slaves do. They don't understand half the things she's talking about. They don't know what trees are. They're out of sorts on any kind of conversation. These people don't even eat the food. They will get it essentially condensed down almost to a perfume or a fragrance, and then just sort of drink it and understand the nuances that way. so that she's from out of their world. She understands different flavors and she's like almost like a rock star. It's very, very convoluted, but very cool. The concepts are cool. That we have ends up being where she talks to a high-end elf, a lord in charge, I think, and he's explaining like, oh, it's as big as a mountain. He's like, that's interesting. Is that a fake word? Mountain. She's like, no. And so he's like, okay, so what is a mountain? That's how out of it they are about things. She starts talking about her father, and he thinks that's another fake word. And so she's explaining like procreation. And they understand procreation, but then birthing, like to them, it would be like watching an insect give birth to like a weird bug seed thing. They're just instantly disgusted. Like, what do you mean you came out of that? What do you mean you were birthed out of that person? And she's like, what do you mean you weren't? And he's like, no, everyone comes from I forget what they called the water. The Mar or something like this. He's like, everyone just comes from the Mar, and at some point you'll die and go back to the Mar. And that's where these slugs come from, and that's what the souls are for, and this and that. Very convoluted, very fun though. This is some of the fun of this series is taking sort of side steps or steps out of the norm of fantasy. We all know what the norms are with elves and dwarves and orcs. But to rearrange it a little bit. This book does a really good job of that. And the series on a whole tends to do a good job of that. And this is just one example. This very outlandish situation. She sends the crow out to find the prince who is famous. Because she thinks we need imperial help to stop before this thing, destroys the world or whatever she thinks it'll do. So then we are introduced to Prince Atrebus. He gets this message and he's all for, let's go help the cause. His dad's not having it. So he takes his own crack squad of elite fighters and he's going to lead them into this probable death mission. They then get betrayed, all instantly killed, and he gets captured and he's going to get sold. And in the course of his capture, he's just told off like, you're an idiot. You were never a great fighter. You're not a great commander. We've been sending you to places that are already preset on how it's going to go, on no-fail missions. And you just are hyping these things up in your mind. No one actually really likes you. You're a joke. And I'm like, whoa, that's kind of harsh. And he takes it that way. It really... He's a nice guy, but he is kind of an idiot. But it's not his fault he didn't know. I sort of blame his dad for trying to coddle him too much. But it is kind of rough to just kick a guy in the teeth like that. He tries to escape, and he's just... When your captor's just whipping you with one hand, you got to know you ain't it. And that's got to be hard when you think you're like a legendary fighter. He gets saved by Sul, I believe a Dunmar, which is a night elf. He gets saved by Sul, and Sul wants him to help. He's like, you got to lead me to Unbar, this floating city. And we got to take it out. He's mysterious as to about why. Something about a lost wife, this kind of energy. And they have a sort of a grand adventure getting there. I do like this guy. I like Sul. I like Anaig. It's spelt weird. And Mir Glim. I like these characters. Again, I just wish more. I just wish for more. He does eventually, right? He comes to grips with what he is. The guy's telling him, like, yes, you're an idiot, and yes, everyone in court probably knows it, but no one in town does. Everyone in town thinks you're great. So it's not half as bad as they could be. And he eventually just leans on that and actually risks for the first time in his life to actually go at this island. And he gets there. with Sul. And they meet Wuhan. I think at some point in defense of their land, Wuhan and Sul got sucked into an Oblivion Gate. Oblivion Gates are sort of what they sound like. These big gates will show up, and through them is like the demon realm. There are Daedra in there. There are all kind of monsters in there. It's dark. It's horrible. You can go into them in the game and out, obviously. But for the story purposes, they went in and couldn't get out until they find, how do you get out from the underworld? It's tricky. Sul finds his way out, but his lady dies at some point. What Wuhan does is, after a while, he concocts a way to take a chunk of it through so that it's still sort of tied to Oblivion, the Oblivion realm. So it's not actually part of the real world. So no one on the thing can leave or they'll die. But if you stay on it, you're basically immortal. Because demons don't just age and die. And he's collecting souls with the point of, at some point, if he gets enough magic, enough power, he can break free and just rule this whole city like it's his own. And I mean from top to bottom. That's why these people don't understand what a birth is, because they weren't born. All of it's created from him. That's why this sort of underwater zone can exist in this floating city. All of it, from the top to the bottom, is his concoction. He needs these souls, and then he can generate these lives that live and do these things. The city looks the way he wants. He can get rid of anyone he wants, and he just lets it play out around him. He's power hungry with it, and he didn't want to get rid of it. And he needs there was a sword that captured a Daedra Lord that could still haunt him. But if he finds the sword, he can use it to capture that Lord and just be truly free. He wants pure autonomy. And that's why he's even talking to Sul and Prince Atrebus when he captures them. Of course, we know the heroes went out. Sul summons a Daedra Lord, who I believe cuts Wuhan's head off. And everything goes ham for them. So from their end, success. Sul killed the guy who killed his lady. The prince actually fought, actually saved the day in the realm from a floating city that can suck up souls. But when we cut back to our two starting heroes, Anaig and Mir Glim, this is the worst, the dissatisfaction, right? They had managed to repair up and we're going to jump off the island and have, a slow fall spell to get down to safety. And I think at some point that's when this fight was going on. And they get sucked back on. Somehow they're tethered to it now. And when Wuhan dies, I think it gets sucked back in, because it was just a piece. It gets sucked back into whatever Oblivion is now. And so I guess that's in the next book, because that's how the story ends. And an epilogue, them stuck back on this island, disheartened and going, we'll find a way. We'll find a way. And I'm very disappointed. I like these two. I wanted them to get off the island. I don't know how they're going to get out of I don't know how they're going to get out of Oblivion. Pretty sure they won't die, but I hope they don't. I might still read the next book in this series. I might not. I'm not sure. I probably will if I get a chance. But I wouldn't recommend it to someone new to this property. If you're new to this property, I would recommend, what's the one? There's a game called Oblivion, and then there's a game called Morrowind. Those are two fantastic ones if you get your hands on them. I prefer Morrowind for how it starts, but it's kind of, the colors aren't as good, and it can it can sort of depress you after like 16 hours of just seeing brown everywhere. Side issue. They're fun games. I would recommend you play the game before you read this book. Even if you're like a fantasy fan. I know it doesn't make sense to like, I'm here to read, but there's plenty to read and do in the game. It's like living the story. It does a really fantastic job. It didn't get in your way at all. But if you liked in the games, I don't think there's a problem with you reading this book. But I would have some pre-knowledge and some background with it before I started this book. It really does lean on that a lot for the enjoyment factor. It doesn't, like I said, it just misses this one element. I think they could have really sold it to all sorts of fans. But as it is, I can't in good conscience recommend this to normies or just to a general book audience. It didn't carry enough of its own weight. All right. That's the Infernal City. I will talk to you, lovely lot, next week. I was about to hit my hands together without saying ad time. These are my books. I wrote these books. You can buy them. Help the channel by helping me by buying them. You can get Kindle Unlimited as of the time of the filming of this video and read them through the subscription along with other books. And that way, if they suck, according to you, you won't be out any money or value, I would say. You lose the money, but you get value in other books. Or you can watch the videos, you can like, you can subscribe, you can comment. All acceptable here. Okay, people. I'll talk to you next week.